Yay. Hello, everybody. It's 2 o'clock. I've just been counted in by Phil, our fabulous tech behind the scenes, making the magic. So I want to thank you for joining us today for Fusion Fundraisers, a hybrid event experience and best practice roundtable. Today's topic is one I think you'll be very interested in, especially if you host, imagine, or have anything to do with the planning or execution of your org's fundraising events and galas. Today, we will be discussing all things event planning, logistics, and execution for what we're calling hybrid or fusion fundraising events. And I know this is today's hot topic and probably will be for some time. And I know that a lot of you are also planning, brainstorming, and kind of reimagining what your hybrid events might look like. So I'm very glad you chose to be with us today because we have so much amazing content to cover and discuss. Before I dive into that, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Misty Marquam. I'm the founder and principal at Marquam Auction Agency. And over the past 15 or so months, we've shared our experience of how we've been pivoting galas and fundraisers to virtual events and experiences. And as a result, we've developed an arsenal of tips and tricks and things that, kind of ensure virtual success. And now as we transition into the latter half of 21 and into, these hybrid and fusion events, one of the most important things to nail in this new world of fusion fundraising is proper planning and execution of event logistics. I'm telling you, the smallest detail can derail the best laid plans. Without a rock solid plan, things can and do like literally melt down, and they do it quickly with everybody watching. And now for added posterity, they're recorded too. So and not just on one front. If you're talking about hybrid, you're talking about an in-person event that's happening and some sort of live streamed event going on. And imagine if both of those melted down, like, whew. So we'd like to ensure your success for both, and logistics are critical to doing that. So today, the goals are very simple. We will define from our differing perspectives what a hybrid fusion fundraising event even is so that you have a better understanding. We may discuss some event style variations because really there are so many different ways this could be imagined and executed. I think we're only really limited by our creativity and our tech budget anymore. And then we will definitely talk about the top 10 FAQs. And these are the questions that all three of us have been getting asked pretty regularly. I kind of compiled them all and used the questions that we had a lot of overlap in. And so you'll get the skinny on pricing, on how to do it. And, people always ask us things like, is it like paying for two events? We'll answer this. And then at the end, we'll save some time for some Q&A. So we know questions arise. So please type any and all questions that you have right in the chat. Later at the end, I will funnel them towards our panelists, give them an opportunity to answer. And before I introduce our rockstar panelists, I'd like to invite all of you with us today to join us for our final Fusion Fundraiser webinar and best practice installment. It's a hybrid event variation showcase, and it's scheduled for June 2nd. And I don't want to give it all away, but I just want to let you know we will be joined by 10 fundraising experts and benefit auctioneers from key markets around the nation. We've been meeting weekly since the onset of the pandemic last March, and we've been discussing, everything really. But we will not only discuss best practices, but we will demonstrate variation of hybrid fusion events. I think it will spark a much needed conversation about the creativity as you dream up what your event might look like. Because honestly, we don't just want to keep regurgitating the same event over and over. So bonus, we will be giving away multiple consigned trips, unique experiences, and gift cards throughout the entire showcase. And we would love to send you on a dream vacation, compliments of one of our consignment partners. So all you have to do is register and join us live for the show. And hopefully the link should be dropped in the chat so you can get registered. Again, it's on June 2nd. We can't wait to see you. But until then, let's get back to the awesome that is today. To facilitate this great, in-depth, knowledgeable hybrid event conversation, I knew that today's logistics and event planning roundtable discussion needed logistics rock stars, as well as varying points of view. So I took the liberty of inviting two local, renowned, small, women-owned business event planner mavens to the proverbial table to join us today. And full disclosure, we at Marquam have worked with both of them. They're both fabulous. We can personally speak to their levels of professionalism, their topic expertise, and deliverables. So we love working with them. They're fantastic. I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves to you now. And please, ladies, tell us a little bit more about what you do and anything you think our viewers might find of interest. So up first, please welcome the founder and principal of Raise Agent, Lauren Dully-Clark. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, it's so good to be here. I'm really excited to be part of this. I was really thrilled when Misty invited me, and knowing that I was going to be doing this alongside Sam, who I've been a fan of forever. I'm just excited to talk to you about the evolution of events, and share the things we've learned over the last year, especially. I'm Lauren Clark, founder and principal consultant for Raise Agent. I launched Raise Agent with a goal to guide nonprofits in their fundraising event planning, to make the process of event planning smoother, more efficient, and ultimately exceed revenue expectations. I'm grateful that we have been able to provide this level of support to our clients this year. It has really forced us to reimagine what event fundraising looks like. But I am honored to be joined with fundraising strategy trailblazer and the brilliant and inspiring Sam Swaim of Swaim Strategies.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm equally excited. I've been like giddy all week about this conversation, mostly because I am just huge fans of you both. You all are trailblazers that took the brave leap to jump off the edge of the cliff the day the pandemic started. Side by side, the two of you did two separate events that were both phenomenal, broke fundraising records. And I have just been in awe of everything you've continued to develop and grow and think, rethink, learn, relearn. Amazing, beautiful job. So I'm excited to talk with you all today. Thank you for inviting us, Misty. I'm Sam Swaim. I'm the co-founder and strategic director at Swaim Strategies. And like Lauren and Misty, our team has been deep in the virtual world for 15 months, almost 16 now. It's unbelievable how long this has gone on. None of us thought it would go on this long. And honestly, I wasn't sure how effective virtual events would be. And I think all of my doubts and concerns went away very quickly watching how the two of you navigated virtual events. And since that time, we have just continued to track, learn, grow, change, learn, and all of those sort of new creative ideas and solutions that have been brought to the table for this virtual space. I'm excited to figure out how do we carry them forward into this exciting new world. So I'm cautious and I'm also optimistic about how people have been able to change in this time. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yay. Well, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Lauren. And thank you both for being with us today and sharing all of your event wisdom and expertise. I know you don't have to. And I think this speaks volumes about just sharing and the philanthropic community that we're all a part of here in our little part of the world. And, you don't see this very often where you get this type of collaboration. So I just want to thank you. Thank you very much. For our viewers, as you can tell, you're in for a treat with our panelists today. So if you'd like to get in touch with any of us, our contact information should have been on the slides. Please reach out. We want to answer all of your questions. So we also ask that you continue posting your general questions as they pertain to planning, logistics, and hosting Fusion fundraisers in the chat. So right now, I'd like to pause very briefly before we get into the meat of our topic for a quick poll. I know how y'all love polls. We want to know, are you planning a Fusion event in 2021? And if your answer is yes, please drop in the chat what your biggest concern or worry or pain point in the planning of it is. This will give Sam and Lauren and I a really good idea of kind of where you're coming from, what your pain points might be, so that we can speak to them as we move through the rest of today's webinar. So please answer the poll now and drop your biggest pain point, worry, or concern about planning in the chat. And Phil, when you're ready, I'd love to reveal the results of our poll. I'm going to give you all a couple of seconds to answer it. All right, let's see what we can do here. Yes, Deanna, I'm with you on that. Look at this. 52% of you responding today said, yes, we will be hosting a Fusion or a hybrid event in 2021 or two. Only 10% of you said no. There's about 38% of you who are currently on the fence. I hope that today, by the end of today, you will have decided one way or the other if it is for you. And what I'm seeing in the chat right now is it's mainly cost that is a pain point. communications is a big pain point, and how do we talk about, thank you, Allie, for talking about the experience for people at home versus in person, and if you'd have a better ROI, and see if it's even worth it. I love these. So great information, everybody. Thank you so much for playing. And I'm going to transition to our first roundtable question of the day, which is, it's just a simple, what is a hybrid style Fusion fundraising event? And I'm going to let Lauren and Sam answer this question, but I'd also like to tack in there, ladies, what are some of variations when you're answering that? Like if you could outline some of the cool things you've heard about or you've worked out, we'd love to know. So Lauren, what is a hybrid and what are some variations?
Yeah, so a hybrid style Fusion event combines a live in-person event with a virtual online component. So hybrid is one event with two experiences. That's the way that I can explain it best. It's not either or, it's both and more. So being creative and thinking outside the box, coming up with new ways to reinvent the event concept is really important. Connecting people to your mission and making them feel like they are part of something important. Engaging your audience wherever they are located with a crafted experience around key messaging. And technology is essential to be able to connect with your audience and for them to actually participate in your fundraising opportunities. We have several different formats of a hybrid event. I know that Sam and I are going to be talking about those in a little bit. But one of the ones that we're really excited about right now is just the idea of having a VIP reception with people in person that are essentially the studio audience of the live stream event. So that's one that we're really excited about, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later.
Thank you, Lauren. That's an awesome answer. I love it. And Sam, what would you say if you have anything to add on what is a hybrid and some variations that you've been loving lately?
Well, it's funny. I wanted to talk about the variation because on your last slide, you had it looked like a drive-in. And I know Brenda Kinoshita from Clackamas Women's Services is on the call. And she was one of our first hybrid events that we did. Her organization really took the brave step of looking at how do we do a drive-in gala. And it was fun. We had an audience at home and we had an audience at the drive-in. So really, it is exactly as Lauren was saying. I think it is the opportunity to meet people where they're at, to be able to have audiences in different locations. And I think the thing I'm most excited about is it's a chance for us to bring in the best of both worlds and figure out how do we really help people to feel connected to your mission, learn your story, really feel passionate about it in a way that they feel safe, which even before pandemic, I think that there is a whole world of introverts and extroverts that consume the world differently. And virtual events have been getting rave reviews, especially by introverts. So what an amazing opportunity to be able to meet people in all locations, not have the capacity issue of a ballroom, and to kind of think outside the box about, instead of what we've always done, how do we do it different? How do we immerse people more in the mission and the work?
Yeah, great answer. And I love these answers too. So I'm super excited to get to our next question, which I think, it's interesting to me to see your definitions and your variations and your perspectives. But what I love is what this sparks creatively for everybody, right? So I'm just totally excited to see what we can get out of this in the end. So viewers, I hope you're listening to the absolute gold you're learning here today. We've got some of their very best in the business. So our next question can be answered in a lot of different ways, but what are your must-haves for when executing a fusion or a hybrid fundraising event? So Lauren, from a planning and logistics standpoint, what are your absolute must-haves?
Absolutely. So, our must-haves for a hybrid are sort of three essential components. So you want to inform, involve, and entertain. So informing is, creating engaging content for both in-person attendees and virtual attendees, so they feel connected to exactly what you are conveying. So it's storytelling, it's being able to engage all guests from wherever they are with a clear call to action on how they can participate as well. So informing, involving, and then the last one is entertaining. You want to make it fun, you want to make it lively, you want to perform, create, celebrate. This is an event, so it should feel like one, Your host and auctioneer really are the anchors. They set the tone and they keep the pace. So as you're developing and planning what hybrid will look like, you want to think of how are you going to inform with story? How are you going to involve? So how do you want people to participate? And then how are you going to entertain them? Who's going to help send the message and really anchor your event?
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much. And Sam, what would you have to add to that? What are your must-haves for a
I know
hybrid
you
event?
wanted differing opinions today, Misty,
I
but I
know.
completely
It's hard.
agree with everything Lauren has said. I think content is king is the old phrase. I think it's true. Content is king and queen and everything else, because your story is what's so important. But I'm going to say yes to everything Lauren said, and then I'll add an and, which is I go immediately to the logistics and start to think about, I wouldn't recommend doing this work without someone like you or your team, Misty, a professional who is comfortable adapting to strategy, leveraging the energy that is now going to be in person and online, and can get centered and anchored in all of those different pieces coming at them at once. So I think having someone that is a fundraising host, that is a professional benefit auctioneer, is critical to being able to navigate all of those different spaces. Additionally, to navigate those spaces, I think you need a way for your host to be grounded in what's happening out of the room. So a confidence monitor that allows them to start to see what's happening with the thermometer, what's happening in the chat, the ability to be fed information through some sort of teleprompter or cue sheet where they're understanding who's giving both in the room and out. Because for us, I think one of our key things that we're leaning into is how do we use this evolution standpoint as a time for us to be really focused on community-centric fundraising, which is really a much more equitable lens to look at fundraising. And that means we're not just acknowledging the big donors, we're not just acknowledging the donors in the room, we're acknowledging everyone's gift. And that has been the thing with virtual that is the must that we need to adapt and take with us, which is when we were able to see names on the screen and say names out loud, we are doing donor stewardship in real time. Our event suddenly became fundraising development 101, and we were able to recognize every gift as being equal. And that, to me, is the win that we need to adapt going forward. So I think we need someone who's adept at moving through those various spaces as a host.
Yeah, I would so agree. And I might even piggyback on that, Sam, from the person who is on stage. You need someone that is communicating with you somehow, whether they're virtual or in person, but you've got to have somebody that's pulling all the pieces together, and you've got to have rock solid technology, folks. I cannot stress it enough. Do not attempt this by yourself or with the DJ's equipment, something like that. You really need pros that know how to live stream and know how to have an effective in-person event. So I'll let the AV guys talk more on that next time, but plug to all AV. So thank you so much on that. Folks, we're going to transition here to one more quick poll. And in 2022, I'd love to know, so next year, are you going to host an in-person only gala or fundraising event? In 2022, will you do a virtual only fundraising event? Or in 2022, are you planning a hybrid? And you can also say other. And if you say other, will you drop what you're planning in the chat? Because we'd love to get to know what our market is planning for so that we can have lots of ideas for you as you move forward and navigate that. So folks, in 2022, will you have an in-person, a virtual, or a hybrid fusion, or something else? And if that's something else, let us know what that is. We will speak to that in a moment. So please drop your answers. Look at this. We are seeing tons of answers here. All right, let's do a little reveal if we can. Yes, look at this. In 2022, 32% of you will only have an in-person event, okay? 4% of you are considering doing only virtual. Look at this. 52% of you plan on doing Fusion Fundraising or hybrid in 2022. I love it. And for the other 12%, we're going to drop in on our chat a little bit later and discuss your responses, but thank you so much. Isn't this awesome? I love finding out all this information. It's so revealing, and it helps us better serve you. So we're going to transition now to addressing our top 10 frequently most asked questions that we as fundraising event planners and strategists get from our clients and our prospects all the time. So are y'all ready for number one? And Lauren, I'm going to have you answer first. Is
Okay.
a hybrid event right for us? And how do we know if the hybrid model makes sense for our event? How would you answer that?
I would say a hybrid model makes sense when you have attendees who have indicated they would like to attend in person and virtually. If there's no need for attending in person, then don't waste time or money on a hybrid event. Hybrid gives you the flexibility to engage in a way that makes your audience and attendees feel most comfortable. So, and hybrid also reduces the barrier to entry and provides the opportunity for more people to be involved in your mission.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. And Sam, what would you say? How do you determine if a hybrid or fusion event is right for an org and if it makes sense for them?
It's funny because I also think it's a win, like when it makes sense. And that's the piece that I offer just a little caution and cautionary tale on, because what we've learned quickly is that this isn't linear. We're not going to just see the flip of a switch. We take 2 steps forward and we take 1 step back. And I think the challenge we all experienced early on was that we had to cancel, change, redirect, ask sponsors to stay on board early on in the pandemic. And so I think avoiding that replication of cycle and start to plan for what's possible now. So the first thing that we're advising is that you do a risk assessment to understand, like Lauren said, what's your audience comfortable with and what do they feel safe doing. Also, do a risk assessment internally about what is our risk comfort level? How much risk are we willing to take? What liability level do we have? How do we protect ourselves when we're thinking about gathering people? And then thinking about how do you do so responsibly? So there's a term in the event world, duty of care, that I want to share because I think that this is something we all need to learn and start talking about all the time. It's been invisible for a long time. It's our fire marshal laws, it's our catering, food handling regulations, but they are all the standards that we have to meet when we're putting people together in a space. And all of a sudden, there's a new level around duty of care. We now have an obligation, and when I say we, I mean collectively, everyone on this call has an obligation to be looking at safety, following CDC guidelines, be communicating clearly to guests. So I think that that first question of when is probably the hardest one to answer. Our approach is that we're starting with what we know is possible now. So we're planning for all virtual in 2021, even into 2022, and then adding, as we see those 2 steps forward, 1 step back, we're adding gathering components. So house parties, we're starting to see in-studio audiences, smaller gatherings. We're starting to see screenings being planned. But that way, if you're designing your content for virtual consumption, meaning a screen, you can have that meet lots of possibilities and add the gathering component. It is much easier to plan for that and secure sponsors now and start to secure pre-commits and auction packages now than to plan for something that you don't know if it's possible. It's just flat out going to be tough to get people on board if it's not possible yet. So duty of care, risk assessment, that's my starting place. We're planning for what we can do now. And then we see down the road that the inversion will happen where we're actually planning for the stage in the ballroom and live streaming out, like Brenda Ray referenced, that we have program content happening on a live stage. And then we're welcoming an at-home audience to be viewing, similar to like the Academy Awards or the Grammy Awards. So it's going in my head, it's an inversion that will occur where we will be planning virtual primarily and then adding gatherings. And then we'll start to see a shift where we plan in person primarily and adding virtual.
Yeah, I like the strategy of that, Sam, too, because, another one of the pros of virtual is that now that we've got such great video content to share, we're telling stories better, missions are better understood, and that should be a best practice we bring back into the ballroom. Can I get an amen?
Yeah.
Totally. So
Yeah.
thank you, Lauren and Sam, for that. I totally agree with both of you, and there's so much to think about. So our FAQ number 2, we're going to move on now. The thing, we get this all the time, what are the benefits of hosting a hybrid or a fusion fundraising event? Why do we want to do one? So what would you say to an org that's just kind of on the fence? They don't know, they want to know, why should we even bother thinking about this? Lauren, what would you say?
I would say the benefit of hosting a hybrid event is increased attendance. So people can attend from the comfort of their couch for a much lower cost, or they can attend in person if that's what they're comfortable with and they want to connect with people and network and whatnot. But enhanced content engagement is really important and a great benefit of these virtual events, as Sam and Misty were just talking about. So sharing compelling stories through video really allows for concise messaging and recorded content to be used. And also you can repurpose it. So after the event ends and you go off air, it could be used post-event to do a campaign, to ask for further donations and support. Another one is, connection in the digital environment. That's a really good benefit. It creates new opportunities for mission awareness and for stewardship of your donors and sponsors. And, also a lower carbon footprint too.
Amen. Thank you. And Sam, what would you add to that? What are the benefits of hosting a hybrid or a fusion event?
Well, it's funny because I think in the nonprofit sector, one of the sort of things I hear often that is like the thorn in a development director's side is, but that's what we've always done. And it's come from like committee members or past attendees who are like, but you've always done that. And this is the first time in 20 plus years of planning nonprofit events that I see a blank slate. And it's an opportunity to not have to do what we've always done. So that's the most exciting benefit to me. I agree with everything Lauren said. You create lots of beautiful content that now can be repurposed. We have seen campaigns and virtual events tie together beautifully and very effectively. And it just the reach, the fact that you can now include everyone. And I love what you said about lower carbon footprint, Lauren. I haven't even, thought about that impact, but you're right, where it's a much different sort of output of doing virtual content. So I think there's so many wins that it's definitely something worth considering.
Yeah. And thank you. I would piggyback on that too and say that it's kind of what I'm hearing everybody is thinking about doing moving forward is always to have a component of both. So, I think it's the trend. I think the market is moving in that direction. The West Coast will do it first, then the East Coast, and then the middle will eventually get there. We'll pray for you. Anyway, moving on to FAQ number 3. What event format or formats do you recommend for hybrid fusion fundraising events? Okay, so a lot of people don't know the mechanism or the format of how you might do this. So Lauren and Sam, what would you say? What event format or formats do you recommend for doing a hybrid or a fusion event?
Yeah, so Sam touched on it a little bit. Some of the smaller ones are a watch party. So that's when you'd have like a house party, people gathering together to watch the live stream. And then there's also viewing parties, which are like a studio audience. That's one that we're going to be producing an event for in June in Philadelphia. That's their format for a hybrid event. And then the other one is a live gala with a webcast. So think of like the Golden Globes or the Oscars, where you have an in-person event with a host, and then you have a virtual event host for the audience at home. So those are sort of the 3 that we look at. There's different variations of all those too. But the model that we're kind of diving into as a team and looking at for some fall events that we're doing as well is this VIP reception where people are coming together. It's less than 50 people. And they're having, a welcome reception. Then they get seated in a studio style seating, and they actually watch the broadcast. So they watch what's behind the scenes, like a live studio audience would. And that's being live streamed out to the folks that are tuning in virtually. And then after that concludes, folks get moved to dinner, and they each have their own sort of potted tables, varying sizes. So there's 2 tops, 4 tops, 6 tops. In a courtyard that we have outdoors.
Cool. That sounds like so much fun. I love it. Sam, any other recommended formats that you would really want to elaborate on?
Yeah, I think the formats we're looking at right now are exactly what Lauren said. I actually see those three formats as step one, step two, step three, that we'll
Yeah.
start to progress through them.
Yeah.
Meaning, as you can gather more people, we'll start to transition into bigger events. But I do think that there is an opportunity right now to sort of pull all the what we've done off and start thinking about all that's possible. And Lauren, you had a great phrase about it's better and more, right? It's thinking
Mm-hmm.
about everything that we can do to bring people into space. The power that we're trying to engage folks in is how do we connect them deeply to mission? So if we are looking first and foremost at the outcome that we're hoping to achieve, we can design completely out of the box. If we know what the outcome is, if we're using outcome-based design and looking at ways to dive into mission, I immediately start thinking about, all right, Anthony, you're on the call. Your reach is all about housing and supporting housing. You have so many new developments that are happening. What if we got people out of the ballroom and got people into one of your new buildings before residents moved in? What if there was a way that we were immersing them into your work? What if we had a virtual element and then we were bringing people to a location that you only got to know about during the virtual program that was the after party? There's so many variables that I think we can think more toward the outcome we're looking for. We can kind of wipe away all the things that were sort of stickers for us that we kind of were stuck in, and think about how do we gather people and include folks who are at home so that we're sharing stories effectively, but also just really deeply connecting people to mission. It's the exact same reason why we all go to a winery, right? We get so much more connected to that wine and that winemaker and their product and their farm and the earth they grew their product in. So this to me is an opportunity where we can actually think about how do we bring people in, and really connect them to the earth that we grow our missions in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One format that I didn't hear mentioned, I just want to throw that out there, that we've been talking with some of our larger clients. They're really focused on the donor's experience, whether they're in person or whether they're live stream. They don't want to sacrifice one for the other. And most, tech people, when I talk to them, they're like, well, who's the primary audience? And I'm like, well, there is no primary audience. They're both primary audience. And so we're exploring this idea of doing like a week of giving where we're bookending with events on either side. So a separate in-person something, whether that's formal, fancy watch party, don't know, and at the end of the week, your virtual event that you're broadcasting out to everybody else. And I think that's a really interesting idea, because then you can take like the max to both experiences and you don't have to have any sort of compromise. So just wanted to add. Let's check out FAQ number 4. And this one, I bet you've been asked this a million times, Sam and Lauren. I definitely have. How do we maintain equity in this new world of hybrid fusion and fundraising events? And I'm really curious to your assessment of this in particular. So Lauren, what would you say? How do you maintain equity now in hybrid?
Yeah, it's a question we get all the time. It's a question that we have asked ourselves throughout all of this, with virtual, like how do we move into hybrid and maintain that equity? So 3 things that we look at. So donor recognition being one of them. All donors should get recognized verbally and on screen. You can use a thermometer, not only to showcase your progress towards goal, but use a donor scroll to list the names and amounts as they give. So that's a piece that everyone, no matter where they are tuning in from or if they're in person, they get recognized. Accessibility is another one. So regardless of where your audience joins you from, include live captioning, translation, interpreter services, whatnot, for people virtual and in person. And the third one is engagement. So find ways through social media to increase engagement, like using an event hashtag, virtual photo booths. You can even project those, for the in-person events, you can project those and showcase everyone in the photo booth wherever they're located, as well as the chat. That can be something that can also be showcased at the in-person event, so everyone can feel connected in those ways. I didn't touch on the cost part, but I know we'll get to some of that.
Oh yeah, well, I'm sure the whole end of this will just be talking about that. Thanks, Lauren. Sam, how are you maintaining equity during planning SWAIM hybrid events?
Wholeheartedly believe in the dual recognition, that you're recognizing both donors in the room and out of the room so that everyone feels like it's including them, that they get to be a part of that group regardless of where they're at. I also think it's okay to design experience based on who you're designing for. So if you have an at-home audience, it might not be as entertaining to them to watch things like social hour or dancing, but those might be really fun to have for your gathering. So I think that you can include your programming content for the virtual format, but might have other programming elements that are more party related for your folks who are gathered together. So I think design, I think recognition, and then I also think that who is on your stage is a powerful way to bring more equity to your event. We have found in this space that the fact that we pre-record a lot of content allows us the opportunity to have so many more voices. We've been able to have sponsors include messages. We've had them include commercials. We've been able to have so many different constituents. We had one organization that have over 400 staff members, and every single staff member submitted a little clip that was put together as like a 3-minute montage of what they were proudest about working with the organization. And it was the first time that they'd ever had an event that both their donors and their staff were a part of. So I think thinking creatively about how to bring new storytellers to the stage, when you're using video, there's a lot of opportunity to do that.
Amen. I totally agree with both of you on that one. And you know, I'm going to just share a kind of an unpopular observation as well. And you know, I think we all need to ask the question, you know, is fundraising really inherently equitable? Because only those who are able to give, the capacity to give of their time, of their resources, of their talents, whatever, only they are the people that we are withdrawing from on the fundraising side. So, you know, think about that too, because it's definitely a topic, different discussion perhaps.
I would add, Missy, follow Boulet's work on community-centric fundraising, because it's a really powerful way to reframe what is not traditionally equitable. You're right.
Right.
And has been very based in a white supremacist culture. There is so much opportunity that for over a decade, we've been talking about how do we start to break down these divides in fundraising? And this is the opportunity. We all of a sudden saw it happen in real time. And that to me is the sort of exciting part about where we're at.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love it. Yeah, thank you. Let's move to FAQ number 5. And this is a question we get all the time too, is do we need to host both an in-person and a virtual event on the same day at the same time? And if so, is different hosts a requirement, right? So Sam, I'm going to actually let you go first. I realize this whole time I've been going to Lauren. So Sam, what do you say to, you know, should we do it at the same time, the same day? And do we need separate hosts?
Well, I'm always looking at ROI, return on investment. And one of the things that I think nonprofits never have enough of is time. And so if I was looking at the best way to utilize a team's time and expand the time, I would absolutely have it on the same day, because that means it's forcing the constraint for you to be able to hold your content plan and your sponsor plan and a lot of your deliverables to the same timeline and deadline, and create actually dual purpose uses. So you've built all these assets, you now can use them at the same time. You can use them with the intention that there are different audiences viewing different things. I fear that if you started to divide those out and have them, you know, a Tuesday to a Tuesday or something like that, if it's not designed as one continuous event, like you were talking about, which I think is brilliant, Missy, the like week of giving. But if you're designing for one audience and then the other, it's going to create some duplication of workload. So that would be sort of my initial gut. But I also think that it's dependent upon what's the format, what are we designing for, what is the outcome we're hoping to achieve. To that point, do you need a separate host? I think you can do it all with one host, but I also think depending upon the complexity of your event and how much is going on in the room, it could absolutely be beneficial to have two hosts. You could have all of your programming shared, but have content developed sort of like the behind the scenes that is just for the virtual audience. So I love the idea of two hosts. I think that that's an opportunity for you to sort of bring your virtual audience even closer, just like we see. I'm going to keep going back to these examples, the Grammys and the Oscars. It's the red carpet moment, it's the behind the scenes moment. There's one host on the stage, but then there's all these other ways that you're getting access. So I think two hosts can be fun.
Totally. What would you say, Lauren?
I completely agree with Sam on all fronts. I think that having, one event in one day, right? So it's one event, but it's two different experiences. So that's just something to keep in mind with these hybrids. It's not an in-person event, it is a hybrid event. So we really want to maintain that structure and understand it. And I think it also will reduce your costs, like Sam said.
And I might just add to, again, from the perspective of somebody who stands on stage, it is a lot to carry a whole audience, no matter if they're virtual or in person by yourself. And it's a lot to then think of, oh, it's the second audience in a completely different format consuming this content in a completely different way. I think it's hard all by yourself to just bring all of it. So I'm always a huge fan of a dynamic duo, whether it's a dynamic duo on stage and a separate dynamic duo hosting your live stream, that's up to you. But I do think that dynamic duos generally bring a lot more energy. There's a lot more like candid conversation. It just feels more organic. So that's my 2 cents. FAQ number 6, we're rounding the corner, folks. What are common tech challenges I should be aware of going in? And what kind of AV vendor do I really need? And Sam or Lauren, who wants to take this one first?
Go ahead, Sam.
All right, I'm happy to. We're both waiting for the other.
Yeah.
I think when you think about the tech, this is where you start to answer the questions about cost. So, like I mentioned briefly, I think having some resources in the room to help whoever is on stage, whether it be your fundraising host, your MC, your dynamic duo, I think that they need to be able to understand what is happening in the virtual sphere as well as in the room in order to make it feel inclusive. Otherwise, I think it will feel like you're a fly on the wall watching something you're not a part of. And so that technology of confidence monitors is what we traditionally call them in the conference world, where people can see resources to know, oh, okay, this is what's going on online. This is how the thermometer is doing. This is how giving is happening. I think is going to be one critical element. I think the other tech challenge to think about is if you've developed all your content for the screen, but you're just observing in different locations, that is a single live stream. That becomes really more about, okay, now how do we coach our watch party hosts? How do we coach our different viewing locations to make sure that they can all see it on the screen and that they can all hear it equally? That to me is more just direction that you're providing to hosts. The inversion is going to be true when we have really the most of our content is designed for the stage and we're live streaming from the ballroom. Now we need to have all of the added elements of a live film crew that is capturing the ballroom and is capturing the energy and feel of the event. And you could have just a static camera, but that's never going to be as dynamic as probably I would lean into like a 3-person crew. So you have the close-up of the speaker, you have the far room shot, and then you have someone that can move, that is like roaming, almost capturing like people's expressions and capturing what's happening. So it feels more of an experience than just a presentation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lauren, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. And then I would just note that, mobile bidding has become even more than ever a component that will not go away in these events. I think the West Coast was pretty slow to embrace it before we went virtual. But now that we're in it and we've been using it, it's a tool that everyone has become very comfortable with. So still being able to maintain that as part of your, format is going to be really important. So knowing that cost is going to be there to keep that moving, but also looking at the, accessibility, Wi-Fi, all that might be impacted. For now, we've been having people at their homes and other places. It hasn't been as impactful on a Wi-Fi. But when you have and bring everyone in and you're doing mobile bidding, you're going to want to look at that. So that's a big tech piece that you want your AV or your venue to be able to help you with.
Absolutely. And to touch upon what type of AV vendor, definitely someone who's familiar with live streaming and kind of really refining the broadcast that's going out, adding the graphics, doing all that kind of stuff. They also need to be able to plug into your mobile bidding software in some way to display that, use it as a tool, create momentum, what have you. But then if you've got the in-person, again, you want to think of like who were the best of the best in the ballroom, because they need to be both that and the live stream people. So don't scrimp on the AV. That's the one I think we can all agree. That's like one place you do not want to like pinch pennies right now. All right, thank you for that. FAQ number 7. I love this one. Lauren, you brought this to the table. What are the limitations of venues now to meet COVID safety? And I'd love to pose that to you first.
Yeah, it's so challenging because everything's changing. Our recommendation is to really communicate clearly, with venues on their protocol, and also the safety guidelines for your organization. With the liability and risk factors for all of these varies. And you really want to be in good communication with your venue specifically about what their protocols are, so then you can put in place the pieces that will keep your organization safe. I know Sam has some great resources. We have appreciated the ones you've shared with others on COVID. So I'd love for you to, I think you're going to have those to share with folks, which have been helpful for us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we've been kind of following and tracking 2 key resources. I'll actually start with the Health Education Services. So healtheducationservices.net is a nonprofit serving the nonprofit sector on training people to be able to respond to health needs. And so they have a COVID compliance for the event sector and for the live like concert gathering sector. We have gone through that compliance class. It's immense, but it's amazing. And as a nonprofit, I think it's a powerful way to be able to start to understand what are the policies you want to adopt and what are the risk assessments you need to do in advance. Their recommendation is that you have a COVID compliance officer and that you connect to your COVID compliance officer at every venue, because most states are requiring that venues have COVID compliance officers that are partnering with the planning team. So that's number 1, COVID compliance officers, the new crazy thing. But the other thing is the Event Safety Alliance is a group that is releasing, based upon CDC recommendations, they're releasing and updating venue-specific regulations and considerations. Everything from this is the one that's most fascinating to me. How long has the ballroom been sitting empty? Because if you remember, I know Misty and Lauren remember, we used to come in on the tails of other events all the time. They'd be rolling tables out while we were rolling our auction in. And that is no longer possible. It may be in the future, but today it's not. So I think understanding with a compliance officer on their team, partnering with someone on your team that understands your own policies and your own risk assessment. So I see that there's a link in the chat. Thank you for sharing that. Great resources. The thing I love about the Event Safety Alliance is that they're updating it regularly, as fast as CDC updates, which feels really fast these days.
Totally, every day. Thank you. And I'd also like to mention, because I am in contact with people from all sorts of markets around the nation, every market, every state is totally different. Like I just got done talking to somebody who hosted a 500-person in-person event already, and they loved it. And I'm like, that would never fly in Portland. So I think it's very market specific and where you are culturally and politically as well. So thank you for that. FAQ number 8 is, how do we handle in-person versus live stream audience as it pertains to giving, bidding, buying, and getting registered? And I will let either of you lead with this, because I know on the back end, this is probably the thing that gives me the biggest headache all the time, is the logistics around this question specifically. So take it away, Lauren.
I would say event software. I mean, number 1, you're going to use, you need to have that tool. This isn't something that you can do in Excel or through different other, apps. You have to have event software that's going to be able to help you manage your guest registration, table assignments, doing check-in, the mobile bidding. So you really, that to me, number 1, just across the board, that's going to make things smoother, because registration is going to be probably contactless. It's going to have, you're going to be able to do it mobily. You're not going to have to really interact with people at this point. We don't really need to hand out materials. Everyone can get that, through their digital devices. So I would say event software, number one.
Amen. I'm a huge proponent of it too.
Yeah.
Sam, what do you want to add to that?
Well, I agree. I think that a mobile bidding platform is something that was slow to adopt on the West Coast and is now just like an ingrained thing that we need to have for every event. It's the way that you create a more inclusive experience for folks to be able to both bid and give. One of the tools that we love is being able to have a text to give so that everyone can be able to give via the same platform, regardless of where they're at. So I think that having a couple of key tools that allow for people to be bidding both in the room and out of the room. One of the things that we've been looking at is, do we start to shift and evolve what our event arc and structure looks like, so that perhaps there's things that just happen in the room and perhaps there are things that happen for everyone. So like the online auction is something that's great for everyone to participate in. But if you have like 5 cool experiences that are related to people who's like actually sitting in the room, like the executive director is going to take you out to their property to teach you, their farming technique, or that this person's going to go ahead and host a cool gathering. That might be something you hold just for in the room, and it becomes exclusive to that audience. So I do think that there are a couple of reconsiderations we have to make about, do we continue to involve everyone? Is there something that's for one exclusive audience or the other? The other thing I would add is there are so many tools coming out on the market. It's unbelievable. But there's a tool that existed pre-COVID that I just see as a great opportunity in this Fusion space called Swell Fundraising. It's a tool that was based out of Georgia. And their model is really designed to be peer-to-peer fundraising happening live in real time, both in and out of the ballroom. And it was that before COVID. So Swell is a very cool tool to consider. Virtual Tables is another very cool tool to consider. Virtual Tables is a New York-based adaptation where you get to watch the event happening in the live stream while you are hanging out in a Zoom-like format with your 10 guests. It is side by side. You can talk to your guests. You can comment on the content that you're hearing. You could talk about how much you're giving. So it's a fun way to be able to sort of replicate what we used to see in a ballroom, is that there's a little peer pressure that when Lauren and I are sitting next to each other and Lauren says, this is how much I'm giving, and I'm like, okay, I'll give too. So that peer pressure element can kind of come into play when you're sort of in space together, like Virtual Tables.
Great tools. Thank you. And the one thing I will say about the only thing that gives me a headache as an auctioneer myself is the bidding on auction items. Because the people in the audience in front of me in person have an advantage. They don't have latency, they're in my line of vision. So they have a distinct, clear advantage over anybody who might be bidding online, at home, off-site. And as an auctioneer, that's an ethical dilemma because, we can't do a sale where we're giving priority to one demographic. So that's the only thing. I think everything else you can absolutely do. And I think it speaks to your point, Sam, of potentially, imagining things that are just for the live people, things that are just for the virtual live stream, and they don't necessarily have to be sharing the exact same content at all times. So thank you for that. I really love it. Now, here comes the kicker, you guys. Number 9, what ticket price should we charge for a hybrid event? And should we charge different prices, if at all? So Lauren, Sam, what do you have to say about ticket prices, and should we have varying ticket prices?
Well, I would both agree solidly on this.
Yeah, I know. I think it starts with an F and ends with an E, which is free for virtual. Keep that accessible. You want people to be able to join in from wherever they are. So that piece is free. For the in-person part, really look at your costs for your event and what does it cost to host someone at your venue. So you want to look at that. I can't, it's hard to say like, oh, charge $150, charge $250 because we don't know that without looking at all the overall costs. But it's really, they're paying to be an attendee at your event. And so it needs to be in line with that, similar to what we had, before the pandemic.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. Sam, would you add anything unique to that answer?
Nope, I 100% agree to that. And I see in the Q&A someone asked, well, is there concern that if we offer online that people won't come to the in-person? And I think there's probably already people making that choice. So online extends that opportunity. So I agree, free to the virtual audience, get more people involved. Get people across the country tuning in.
Everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And this leads us to our final FAQ, everybody, which, is what is the associated cost of planning a hybrid Fusion event relative to all virtual or all in person, right? Are there new costs associated that we haven't considered? And is it the same as paying for two separate events? Lauren, what do you say to that?
It's a great question. I think it's the one that we get the most. How much does it cost? How much does it cost? The way we really look at, costs vary. I think when we moved into virtual, there was things people were like, oh, I don't have to pay for a venue. I don't have to pay for catering. These little costs went away, but the production costs went up. They were paying more for live stream and for, set design or, all the components that you need to really have a wonderful designed experience. So you still want to maintain those things when you go into hybrid. So production costs, that's still probably going to be your number one line item. As you start to add catering and you start to add a venue and look at that, that's where your sponsorship comes in. Your sponsor should really cover the cost of your event, and then everything after that, all the donations, all the bidding, the fundraising, that's your revenue. So just always keep that in mind when you're looking at the model. There's going to be an added cost to do this, but it's also adjusted. It's just sort of turning, your Excel sheet when you did your budget. You're just changing the priorities there for your expenses.
Thank you. Sam, what would you say about the cost?
Well, the joy of a live event in a home, I have like a neighborhood gardener that is cruising by making lots of noise with street cleaning or something, so I apologize. I think, it is, as Lauren said, it's the number one question. I think there may be some costs that lower, and that's something to consider. So if we have folks with varying degrees of comfort in gathering, I think that we will possibly see lower headcounts in attendance. We may also have restrictions of headcount, and we may have venues that are requiring lower headcount. So that headcount reduction may also mean that it's a cost reduction in meals. My guess is your AV in the room is going to go up slightly because now you have to accommodate for some intentionality around the virtual audience being, understood by the hosts. And then you're going to add into that the live streaming element. So AV is by far the thing that is going to be the biggest cost. I think if you use Greater Giving as your auctions a company for your mobile bidding, that's something that you can easily adapt in both spaces. If you're feeding less people, that's something that might go down. If you don't need as big of a venue, that might also go down. So I think it's just sort of reshifting those priorities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what I can add to this is we did a webinar with just tech people on a couple of weeks ago, and we all agreed that the tech portion will be approximately, and don't quote me on this, but approximately 1.7 times what you paid for your virtual and or your in-person. So it's not quite 2, but it's darn close. So thank you so much to our panelists for sticking with us through these 10 questions. Now I'd really love to take a moment and really address some of the questions that we got in the chat. So what I'd love to do is open up the chat here, and for either of you, I'd love to, oh, Anthony, I'm reading your comedian comment and I'm remembering that. Okay, I've got some questions here for you. If they have an option to attend online, I think Sam addressed this a little bit, will they choose not to come in person? And I'm going to take a stab at this one, but I'd love for either of you to definitely jump in. And I'm going to say the people who are choosing to stay at home, they want to be at home. And I'm always a huge proponent of bring the fundraising to the donor where the donor is at. Do not make the donor come to you. But I'd love your feedback and perspective on that too, Sam and Lauren.
I live in a house divided. I am an extrovert. My wife is an introvert. One of us is so excited to go hug everyone in the world, and the other one of us is like, keep me away from it. I want to be in a closed bubble. So I think that it's going to be a yes and for quite some time, just from a COVID safety standpoint. But I also think this just like blew the doors off of events and made it that we can invite everyone in. And so why not? Why limit who could be a part of it?
Yeah. Lauren, anything to add?
I completely agree. I think it's exactly what I would say. Yeah.
Right on. All right. Well, here's the next question. We don't have that many of them. So if you guys have any questions, we've got time. How do you have an in-person event that is a live stream without officially being a fusion? Wait. How do you have an in-person event that is live streamed without officially being a fusion event? I don't know how to answer that exactly. Sam, Lauren, any feedback?
I'm wondering perhaps, Brenda, if she's referring to having your content broadcast, but not having people at home engage, which I think there was actually some of that happening before. Before COVID, we had a couple of events that were being live streamed just simply for sharing story. We never got a return on that though. And by return, I mean, like we didn't see traction. We have volunteers. We didn't see folks get more engaged. We didn't see revenue coming in the door. It was simply just a like outreach of expanding your message. But I do think that as soon as you go into Fusion, meaning you invite people into, oh, good. Okay. Thank you, Brenda. I appreciate the clarity that she saw some of those events. I think as soon as you bring people into participating, which that's what this year taught me, is that virtual events allow people at home to participate and actually be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lauren, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think I was just seeing all these other the Q&As pop up. So I was like, oh, length of Fusion event.
Yeah, we'll get to that. It's coming.
Okay. So I got a little distracted on that one. Sorry.
Quite all right. Quite all right. What does a Fusion event cost? Okay, we've gotten that. What are some of the costs for the people and services involved? So, for example, I'm just going to start off. You've got AV. You've got some sort of an event or logistics kind of coordinator or planner. You have whatever talent you may be putting on stage, whether it's an MC or a fundraising person. What else am I missing? I know there's a ton. I'm thinking virtual, but then there's the in-person stuff. So Lauren, Sam, what are we adding to that?
I think volunteers, just in terms of, you know, how volunteers have been an essential component of an in-person event for so long that they've kind of had to take a different role in this last year. So the incorporation of those and how you're going to staff your event is going to be something also we really want to consider.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. How long or short should a Fusion event be? It's a great question.
I love this question.
I'll let either of you answer it. Take it. Yeah.
Well, I think like Sam said, you know, we're just, it's an open blank slate, right? We can reinvent this. We can reimagine this. No longer do we have to have the 4-hour galas. We can really reduce that. I think people's, you know, just attention span too is shorter. And their comfort level of maybe being out and with a group for a long period of time can be very exhausting too. So I really do see this being reduced down. I know for the event that we're doing in Philadelphia, that one in particular is 2 hours. So it's, you know, people come in, they register, they sit down for, you know, the studio audience. So it's a shorter event, just being really conscious of people's, you know, time. So I would say you could do it in a couple hours.
Totally. Sam, any differing opinion on that one?
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing you're competing with most is that when you have an at-home audience, they might also be cooking dinner, folding laundry, taking care of kids, you know, watching TV. So yeah. I think that short, powerful story-based content for both audiences is probably shorter, like 45 minutes to an hour. And then all of the extra, that's the party, the networking, the socializing, the dinner time, I think that can be sort of the 2 to 3 hours, but program content, I suspect we're still going to be in competition with the rest of the world when folks are tuning in virtually.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I see as a trend, even in person, like timelines are shrinking from 4 to 2.5 or 3. You know, I think people are getting a little more guarded with their time now too, that they're used to being at home. This is going to be a huge shift culturally, just back, you know, stepping back into socializing. Like, yes, please, and you know, all at the same time. Is
Yeah.
there a place for a keynote speaker at a Fusion event? What do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right
I
on.
don't see why not. Yeah, absolutely. It's where you position it, you know, that has to be
Right.
looked at. But absolutely.
I agree.
And they can join from anywhere, right?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. We've actually been able to secure some really incredible keynote speakers that we haven't been able to in the past because they can tune in from anywhere.
Dan Jones, anyone?
Right. That was so fun.
I
But
know.
not only is it powerful in a Fusion space, it's powerful in a virtual space. So like the fact that we can have great speakers that are endorsing our missions and connecting people deeper to our missions, it can be really powerful add-on.
Yeah, thank you guys. And you know, I'm just mindful of the time. I'm realizing we are just over our hour, and I want to apologize for that. But we had such good content, I just figured you'd want it all. But what I will say is this, in the interest of time, I'm going to wrap up, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'm glad you learned a thing or two about planning and logistics for hybrid events from our amazing panelists. Thank you so much to Lauren Dooley Clark from Raise Agent and Sam Swaim of Swaim Strategies. I'm really glad that you guys shared all of this insight with us today. It was very meaningful and impactful. So thank you very, very much. And again, folks, if you'd like to contact either of them directly, you can either reach out to us or they were on the slides. We will give you a copy of this. I want to say a special thank you to our tech partner at Seamless Event Solutions for helping put on today's discussion, and Sarah, our ops manager, for handling the back end of everything. And again, I'd love to invite you to our last installment of the Fusion Fundraiser series coming up on June 2nd. Again, it's a showcase of hybrid event best practices as well as Fusion variation demonstrations. So you'll actually see video of what these could look like. We'll talk about them. The link is in the chat to register, and we will send you all of that when you do. We will be joined by 10 mastermind collaborative fundraising experts from around the nation in key markets. And we will just basically demonstrate everything that we've been talking about to kind of put it into perspective for you all. And the bonus is we will be giving away amazing consigned trips, not one, not two, but maybe, you know, many unique experiences and gift cards. And I'd love to send you on your dream vacation. And maybe if you're lonely, you can just bring me with, because I haven't been anywhere in a hot second. All you have to do is register. The link is in the chat. Please know this event was just recorded, and we will be giving it out to everybody who's registered so you can review it, share it with anybody else you think might benefit from it as well. Good luck on your fundraising endeavors. Please share it. Please share this. And we can't wait to help define the future of fundraising with you as we move into this innovative period. So again, thank you so much to Sam and Lauren. Thank you for joining us today. Here's to changing the world, one fundraising event at a time.